Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. It is April 20th today, and we're going to have a look at what happened on this day in 1820 of April 20th, and give you some information on what happened this day in history, some of the people that were involved with it. So when you're looking through your family connection, if you turn around and say, "Oh, that sounds really good. Am I related?" Then you can go start digging. Because sometimes it's fun to dig up who is in your family tree. So let's start, shall we? So on this day in 1611, the first known performance of Shakespeare's Macbeth was performed at the Global Theatre in London. So, are you somehow connected to William Shakespeare? Did you have people in London in 1611 that may have gone to that performance? Think about it. Our next one, now this one here was really cool. I read this one, I was like, because remember this morning I asked you find the other notebook. Okay, so this morning on my Helen's Great Adventures Day 629, I asked you what do Anders Celsius, George Friedrich Handel, George Baton, Marie and Pierre Curie, the Red Baron, Neil Armstrong, Pierre Trudeau, and George Harrison, Michael Palin, and John Cleese all have in common. They all got up to mischief on this day in whichever year. So let's go down. So we're going to continue going down the list. So in 1736, April 20th, 1736, the French mathematician Pierre, oh, hang on, I have to remember what my thing was for this because I couldn't remember how to pronounce his name. Pierre Louis Maupertuis begins Lapland expedition to measure the latitude and shape of Earth. Because remember, they always thought it was flat. He was joined by fellow scientists Anders Celsius, and we will come back to him in a moment, Charles Edna Louis Camas, Alexis Clairaut, and Pierre Charles Lemonnier. And Anders Celsius founded the Uppsala Astronomical Observatory in Sweden in 1741 and proposed the Celsius temperature scale in 1742. So that's where the Celsius scale comes from for temperature. In 1759, on this day in 1759, George Frederick Handel. Well, hang on, first of all, are you related to any of those French mathematicians and scientists who decided to measure the Earth? In 1759, George Frederick Handel was buried at Westminster Abbey in London. Do you have any ties to him? 1862, and I was like, this happened in 1862. It is quite interesting when you go back and looking at stuff that's happening in history, and you go, oh my gosh, they discovered that then? Wow, I thought that was newer than that. So this one surprised me. In 1862, the first pasteurization test was completed by Frenchman Louis Pasteur and Claude Bernard. So pasteurization goes all the way back to 1862. You think of all the food that we get pasteurized, like all our dairy that's pasteurized. That started in 1862. I'm like, what? But, do you have any relations that go back to the Frenchman Louis Pasteur or Claude Bernard? On this day in 1879, and this one I was really excited about, because I live in Sparkles, which is an RV, a mobile home. This one was called in 1879. The first mobile home, horse-drawn, was used in a journey from London and Cyprus. Think about that. The first mobile home. So you're probably thinking, oh, but you got all those people that were in the wagons and all that. Yeah, they went in the wagons, but the wagons were not their home. They were covered wagons. They just had their storage stuff in there. They were sleeping under tents or under the wagons. They would cook everything outside and all this. This is the first mobile home. So it was set up like a home. So I thought that was kind of interesting. 1879. In 1887, George Baton wins the world's first motor race on a steam-powered quadricycle. And it was a test organized by the French newspaper oh, I'm probably going to screw this up. Le, Level, Levelcopedia. I got that bit right. Pedia. It was a French newspaper. Um, so I was sort of like, wow, they had a steam power, first motor race was in 1887. Steam powered quadricycle. Think about that. They used to call cars quadricycles. I guess they just put two bicycles together and off they went. In 1902, Marie and Pierre Curie isolated the radioactive compound of radium chloride. 1902. Any relations back to that? Um, this was quite a cool one. Um, only because I've heard so many songs and stories about it, and especially Snoopy's Christmas. If you know the song Snoopy's Christmas, then you'll know where this came from, where that song came from. So in 1918, Manfield von Richthofen, aka the Red Baron, okay, shoots down his 79th and 80th victims, marking his final victories before he died the following day when his plane was shot down. So you think somebody who has shot down 80 planes would be a little more cautious about getting his own butt shot down, but 1918 that happened. In 1962, the NASA civilian pilot Neil Armstrong, this is in 1962, so this is 7 years before he steps foot on the moon, takes the X-15, which was one of their test rocket planes, to 63,250 meters, which is 39.3 miles up. That was quite a feat. Any relation to him? There you go. In 1968, Pierre Trudeau was sworn in as Canada's 15th Prime Minister. His son, Justin Trudeau, is the 23rd Prime Minister, is the current and 23rd Prime Minister of Canada. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then I was reading a little bit more about Pierre Trudeau. He actually lost an election, was out of Prime Minister for a year, and then came back again. But they still called him the 15th Prime Minister. So he was actually only out for again. And this one here, I love, love, love the song. It is absolutely hilarious. And watching Monty Python do this. So Monty Python was on tour in 1976 around the States. They were performing in New York City at the time. And Monty Python included John Cleese, Michael Palin, Eric Idle, Graham Chapman, Terry Jones, and Terry Gilliam. And these guys were up on stage doing their show in New York City when George Harrison comes in dressed as a Mountie, because they were on stage as Mounties at the time, dressed as a Mountie, and sang the Monty Python, the Lumberjack song. And if you have not heard the Lumberjack song, go Google it, go find it on YouTube. It is hilarious, and watching their reactions when it was done. I don't think there's actually a video of George Harrison's performance, but I do know there's Monty Python video clips of the Lumberjack song with them doing it, and it's quite a cool little song. So there is a few songs that have come off that have used that same tune as well for different things. But those are some of the things that have happened in history today. So do you have anybody in your tree that were around in those areas at that time when those events were taking place? Or do you have a connection to anybody in that place? Now, when I'm saying connection, I'm meaning not direct lines, because I know there are some people out there who never went on and had any children, so you won't be a direct descendant. But you could be a cousin coming in through lines of siblings somewhere along the way. So always keep that in mind when you are looking to say, oh, am I related to this person? Don't just look for the direct lines, look for the sidelines as well. Like I have one client who I helped her with her tree, and she said, oh, we've had a rumor that we're related to this particular historical figure. And so we found out very quickly that she would not be a direct direct descendant of this historical figure, because they never had any kids. And when I told her that, she was very relieved. I don't know why, but she was relieved. But I had to go learn more about this person. The cool part is that when I'm researching genealogy, I get to go and learn more about some of these famous historical figures that are around, whether they are American historical figures, ones from other parts of the world. I get to go learn more about them, and then it's fun seeing, is there a connection in there? And so while we're researching her great-grandmother's line of the tree, um, we're about 95% sure that she's related to this historical figure, but we just haven't found that connection. We're going up the same line, and her great-grandmother was born within 6 years of this historical figure being born, so that immediately ruled out the fact that they were that there was a direct line there. There was not any sibling lines because he only had brothers. He never had any sisters. Um, but this family is very well documented, and so through all the documentation that's out there, we've been able to trace it back so far. And then there was a book that was printed in the 1940s of a guy along with a few people who had done a very deep dive and a lot of footwork going into the libraries, because back then in the 1940s they didn't have computers. So this is like 20 years of research that they did starting in the 1920s through the 1940s, researching this one particular family. And they've got all the documentation there, they've got all the sources there of how they're able to back it all up about what they have found. And then they said, now this family here and this family here are very likely are connected. We just haven't been able to find that connection. And that these two separate families are actually probably part of this particular family here in this whole family last name. But they just hadn't been able to find the common grandparent that connected everything. So we're about 95% sure that there's a cousin relation in there somewhere, like X number of times removed or whatever. And then as we're going back, we find another relation through marriage to another historical figure. And I love telling her these stories. And then finding out that her great-great-grandparents, her third great-grandparents, her fourth great-grandparents were actually pioneers and settlers of a county in a particular state. And this historical figure that's related to them through marriage actually helped them find this location and led the expedition for them. So this family is very well tied together. And then the fourth great-grandfather has a brother who has a daughter who married into another famous family in an area when a certain event was taking place. So we're like, again, 98% sure that there is a connection with who she married to this particular family and event that was taking place at the time. So, it's amazing finding these connections. And then, of course, you're sort of like, wow, okay, what documentation is out there about this historical family or this historical figure? What information is out there about the events that this person was involved with? So now you're starting to dig deeper into the history of it and finding out these really cool stories and stuff. And then you come across something that's sort of like, oh, we're never going to add that one into the family tree. Or like we didn't know about when I was, all of this was new discovery for me. She said there may be a connection to this person, and there'd been rumored that there was, but it was more of a direct line. But we proved it wasn't a direct line; it's a sideline. But then I said, but now you've got these other connections, and she was just, and the story that happened with her fifth great grandmother, and the family tragedy story that was in that one. Again, all well documented. So this is events that have all been well documented. And so we're able to go into there and read these stories and come back and say, hey, go read some more on this or read some of this. And then I've got other families that I've been researching where there are connections to other famous people as well. And like when you're talking to them, you're sort of like, that name sounds funny. You wouldn't happen to be related to blah, 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 blah. And they're sort of like, well, we think so, but we're not sure. Or, yes, we are, but we're not sure how the connection works. And so then we go and find that connection for them to make sure, just so they can see how it's all working together. So lots of great information out there, lots of surprises when you're going through genealogy, the stories you uncover. Some of these people that we mentioned today could be in your ancestral tree somewhere along the way, and now you've got really cool stories that you can go tell about them when you go research those people and learn more about them and find out who were they, where did they come from, like Anders Celsius, Uppsala is actually the town in Sweden that he was born in. So, if you've got Swedish ancestry, you may have a relationship, you may be somehow related to him, the guy who came up with the Celsius temperature scale. Wouldn't that be cool? And find out the story behind that, and also about the Lapland expedition he was on, where he helped measure the latitude and the shape of the Earth. Remember, they thought it was flat at the time. So there's lots of really cool stories out there that are in history, and you may have a personal connection to them. So that's it for April 20th, Genealogy and History. Have a super fantastic sparkling day. We'll catch you guys later on. Hei konara.